So I'm just going to hit record now. Over to you, Bob.
Thank you, Erica. Good afternoon, good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us. Obviously, the hot topic on everybody's lips has been AI forever, it seems, recently. Since we started the Closer Speakers Consultancy, at the heart of what we do has always been the future and technology. It's something that we've always pushed, and we've been lucky to work with some of the very, very best speakers in those fields. Almost every single speaker on the market now seems to speak about AI. But I want to introduce you to Erica Farmer and Cortney Harding, who are two speakers who absolutely deliver 100% ROI. Over to you, Erica.
Bob, thank you so much. And again, thank you everybody for being with us today. We're going to be together for the next hour or so, and we will send out the recording as well at the end of today's session. So Courtney and I were wondering how we should deliver this webinar for you so you really do get as maximum impact and takeaways as possible. So we cover slightly different realms when it comes to artificial intelligence. So we're really going to stick in our lane. But we're going to start off thinking about, you've probably seen it on the news quite recently, the World Economic Forum gathering last week in Davos, which was particularly focused on, surprise, surprise, artificial intelligence and future technologies. So we're thinking about what does that mean from a business perspective? And Courtney, I know that you're all over this with your clients. You were at MIT last week speaking to them about this. AI, VR, smart glasses. So tell us a little bit about the World Economic Forum last week in Davos, and also why are businesses struggling so much in regards to starting with things like real problems when it comes to AI, and they just go into deploying other technologies instead. So just kind of give us some big picture and go into your experience, if that's okay.
Yeah, absolutely. So I was not at Davos last week. I've been before. I didn't go this year. I had other commitments. But a lot of my friends were there and they were texting me, and there was a lot of news out of Davos, which we won't go into. But specifically, I want to focus on a report called the Minds Report. And I, just for a little bit of context, I'm part of WEF. I was part of the metaverse committees at WEF when that was a thing. And then I have transitioned over to something called the Technology Convergence Committee. And that focuses on emerging technologies, AI, virtual reality, spatial computing, smart glasses, quantum, a lot of stuff around space, which is really fascinating. So the Minds Report is really a sample of companies that are succeeding with artificial intelligence deployment, because there was a stat that came out last year, the MIT Business Review wrote about it, and it kind of went viral, and it said 95% of corporate AI deployments are failing. Now, I don't like that term. I think people need to be able to experiment and build and try things, because that often leads to success, right? The smart glasses that everyone is into that I was talking about at MIT over the weekend would not functionally exist if Google Glass had not failed first, right? But setting that aside, there are a lot of issues with corporate AI deployments really just not taking off or not, getting any momentum. And so the Minds report was really interesting because it showed what companies are doing. And what I think really ties a lot of these projects together is they are solving real problems. So they are not just sort of giving everyone Copilot and saying, here, use this, record your Zoom calls. They are really targeting, micro-targeting problems that could not have been solved without this technology. So the Minds report had a lot of really good medical use cases, which I think is fascinating, right? Pulling together tons of data and coming up with solutions and cures and synthesizing research. So, it's an interesting report. It's available for free on the WEF website. It's a good read. And I think it's really kind of a good framework for how to approach this in the future.
Yeah, and like you said, we see a lot of, and I don't know about you, but I have clients coming to me going, Erica, we want to deploy AI, or we need really great AI adoption scores because we've gone to the board to say we'll have an 80% uptake in Copilot within 90 days. And the first question I always ask is, well, what's the problems that you're looking to solve with this technology? Which I'm often like met with a blank face. Is that your experience as well?
Yeah, I mean, if you're watching my facial expressions, right? Like, yeah, no, I don't ever play poker. Actually, do play poker with me because I'll lose, right? I
Because
know.
you're
When it comes to this, I mean, I tend to call it like performative deployment or performative technology adoption. And I have a friend who works at a big US bank, and she kind of allowed me to listen into her CEO's kind of end of year town hall. And they started talking about AI, and he sort of had this big lead into, oh, we're doing all this stuff with AI. And it basically was Copilot,
Uh-huh.
which is fine. I'm not opposed to Copilot or corporate ChatGPT or any of those things. I think they're quite useful. But what was illustrative to me was like there were some small departments that had done very interesting things with the technology. So there was one department that was using ChatGPT for like persona creation, and another was using it to really streamline a lot of approval processes. So there were like little seeds, but there was not any kind of overall strategy. There was not any big picture strategy. And I think this is where, Erica, you and I are aligned,
Yeah.
is talking about, well, what exactly are you trying to do? I come from a virtual reality background. I've been creating virtual realities for 10 years now. And a lot of what I was doing back then was going into organizations and said, we want to do VR. And I was like, well, what do you want to do? And they couldn't answer that question, right? And so I think it is incumbent upon us now to not just sort of say, okay, everyone gets Copilot, have fun, but to really pinpoint like problems, the reason for the problem, which is really critical, the solution you want to build, and then figure out how to build it. And then once you get beyond the pilot phase, how to deploy it very quickly at scale throughout the organization.
Yeah, the real unlock is at scale, I think, there, isn't it? That's exactly what you're talking about. So that sounds like a really fairly simple but good kind of use case in regards to having a framework to deploy AI across an organization. What are the practices and frameworks and tips and tricks would you share with the audience listening today?
Yeah, so I think the first is make sure you have an understanding of the technology. And I don't mean that from sort of an AI researcher perspective. I mean, what can things do realistically right now? Because we have seen examples of companies saying, we're laying off our entire customer service team and it's going to be all AI. And a few months later, they're like, oh, oops, walk
Just a
that back.
180ing on that one.
Just walk that back a little bit. I think a lot of leaders of AI organizations have done a particularly poor job of explaining what they can actually do at any given time. What are the limits? What are the opportunities? But then also, what are the limits, right? I use Lovable a lot. I've built a lot of websites. I've built a lot of things with Lovable. I think it's fantastic, but there's a lot you can't do. You can build rudimentary, interesting things and get pretty far, but you're not going to build an app that becomes like a real business probably just on Lovable. You need more. So
Mhm.
I think it's having an understanding of what are the capabilities and then going in with a mindset of like, this is the first problem we're going to tackle. Because I think too often organizations just get excited and they sign up for everything. And as someone who has a lot of subscriptions, I sign up for everything and then I have to go through and like cancel a lot of them just because I'm like, I'm not using this, which I think is a common human experience in this day and age. But again, like really understanding what are the areas you're trying to solve? Where's the money you're trying to save? I mean, that's,
Yeah.
I think for a lot of big companies at the end of the day, the bottom line is they need to, redeploy capital and save money. So, what is the outcome that we're looking for in terms of not just, oh, this is faster, but like this is faster and thus it saves us X amount of dollars per
Mhm.
year. And I don't see a lot of companies doing that right now.
Mhm. Yeah. And I think one of the unlocks to that as well sometimes is whether you have your cottage industry of people who've identified these great tools and they start suddenly using that within their workflow or their teams, but don't go and speak to the transformation team or the product owner or the IT team. And I always say when I'm approached, particularly for HR directors, is go and make the IT lead your best friend,
Yeah.
because that's the person that's going to scupper your plans or actually help you scale that across the organization, right? Is that real joint working rather than that silo working that perhaps we might be used to?
I think there's another issue that is starting to come up now, which is, and this happened to a friend of mine recently, and it's really illustrative of a lot of the mindset shift that we need around AI. Because I think there's a non-0% of the population right now that are just terrified of these tools. And a lot of
Yeah,
that is
for sure.
misunderstanding. A lot of that is the fact that many AI leaders love to get up on stages at Davos or, the New York Times Deal Book Summit or name your conference and sort of say, it's going to replace everyone's jobs, and then sort of sit back smugly and collect the money. And that's just patently not true, right? But it's not telling a good story. So, a friend of mine is a project manager, And she got really into AI and started like automating a lot of her workflows and doing, just using these tools, and got to a point where she had automated a decent enough chunk of her workflow to say, okay, I can take on more work. I can evolve in my career. I can grow and change. And when she went to her boss and kind of explained all this, her boss lost his mind and was basically about to fire her because he was like, well, why do I need you if you have tools? And he basically said, you're cheating.
Gosh.
And
Wow.
to be clear, she was not doing anything that was like a data privacy issue, right? There were no issues around that, which is kind of a separate topic. But the idea was that like AI is cheating. And we see this a lot, particularly on LinkedIn, where every other post I see is, oh my God, you use ChatGPT to write your LinkedIn post. I'm like, it's LinkedIn, guys. It's not that
Yeah.
deep. I mean, I don't particularly enjoy the ChatGPT syntax, right? But if I found out that a novel that won the Booker Prize had been written by ChatGPT, I would be kind of angry. Um, a LinkedIn post is not that, right? A business email is not that, right? A meeting summary is not that.
Yeah.
And so I think there are a lot of misunderstandings about the technology. I think there's a deeper mindset shift that needs to happen where people now have this unfortunate, like, knee-jerk reaction to these technologies. And there's a lot of reasons why. But creating permission structures for people to automate some of their workflows and then take on more interesting, unautomatable work is something that companies should be striving for.
Yeah, I think you've hit the nail on the head as well. You hear a lot of people kind of struggling with their own mindset or their own view. And you're right. If I read another post on LinkedIn about M dashes, I'm going to go crazy. All right, guys, we've done it. So 2025, get over it. But I think there's also that piece around, how do I feel about it? How do I talk to my boss about it? What's the company
Yeah.
policy about it? Do I have the SLT being vulnerable when talking about it and sharing about how they're using it for, I don't know, building strategy or, running the organization and making it feel psychologically safe to use that technology? Working with kind of a large financial services company, before they even brought us in to get their people excited about AI, I was told that the SLT and the exec had already given everybody in the US and the UK, the largest parts of the company, 1 hour per week per person to innovate and experience using artificial intelligence, using Gemini. And I thought that in itself was just like so positive compared
Yeah.
to like the it's cheating, am I allowed to use it kind of technology. And going even further, I know you specialize in more emerging technologies like smart glasses, for example. So how does that fit into the thinking around companies having at the moment?
Yeah, I mean, smart glasses are pretty new technology. They have existed for a while, but they are really going to start to hit mainstream adoption this year. And the curve is starting coming out of, CES and the announcement of a lot of different glasses that are going to be in market really soon, if not already. And I think what that's going to do is create persistent AI. We were talking about this a little bit earlier, but for those of you who don't know, that aren't familiar with the term, persistent AI is AI running in the background, essentially. So right now, AI is and this is something I discussed in my book, a very lean forward technology, right? I am prompting ChatGPT. I am talking to Lovable when I want to update my website. I am doing the things. And that's fine and that's great. But eventually it will become kind of a lean back experience where it's going to have my social graph, a ton of my data. And then rather than me saying, hey, ChatGPT, or whatever LLM I'm using, I'm going to this place. I would like a dinner reservation. Where should I eat dinner in this place? It will just give that to me, right? So it's just going to be this, it'll show up in my smart glasses. It's like, oh, it's 7 p.m. Here's something you want to try for dinner. Here's a bottle of wine you might want to open. Here's the right. So it's just kind of a different way of experiencing and intaking the information. Um, and so I think that's going to be a really big shift. I think that's going to have huge, huge impacts on brands and advertising in particular.
Yeah, absolutely.
Um, I haven't seen any real ad agencies or brands talking about this. I think they're probably terrified of it. And they're still hung up on like, oh, you can use AI to make ads,
Mhm.
like Coca-Cola has done in particular. And so I think that we're still very early. And one thing that I kind of constantly have to remind myself is, Erica, you and I are really far ahead, right? We live in a world where this is just like normal to us.
Uh-huh.
And I think most people, if they're using ChatGPT or any of these LLMs at all, they're using it as like a replacement for Google,
Uh-huh.
right?
Absolutely. Yeah.
or they're using Copilot to summarize their meetings, or they're doing kind of these really simple use cases, which are great introduction and very useful. But every day I'm kind of reminded of how far behind we are. So I was in Boston this weekend speaking at MIT. There's a big snowstorm in the US, and so I had to change my train to get back earlier. And I couldn't just do it, or it wouldn't even like in the future, it will just automatically do it, right? It'll just be like, oh, you're booked on this train. I had to call and sit on hold with the train company for a good hour. There's no reason for that. There's literally zero reason for that situation to exist given what we have today, but it does. Right? Every airline is collapsing right now under the weight of customer service calls because all the flights were canceled. There's no reason for that. AI can solve a lot of that. It just hasn't been deployed to do so. So I think when people get concerned about adoption curves or job replacements, it's a little premature because again, this stuff takes a lot of time. But that doesn't mean businesses should not start now, because they will be disrupted if they don't.
And so disruption in can mean so many different things as well, right? Disrupted in so many different ways, from, like you said, from a customer service perspective, as you were disrupted in regards to just trying to get home, versus kind of just disrupted from, what does it mean for our whole client base, or our sales forecasts, or, and any issue around cybersecurity. This stuff has so many implications. But let's kind of zone it back down and think about, like, we've dialed into today's webinar. What are kind of, bearing in mind, you've been so clear in regards, we've got that adoption curve, we've got people at that end of the bell curve and people at that end of the bell curve, and the majority of people in the middle. If I was running an organization, if I was in HR, if I was an IT lead, if I was a transformation lead, what expertise, what tips would you give me if I just didn't know where to go with this stuff right now?
I mean, so I would say the first thing is really just sign up for get subscriptions to a bunch of tools and just start building things. So I think there's two things. One is kind of the bigger problem solution framework, right? So really start brainstorming on that regard, pulling together what are your biggest problems, doing the deep inquiry into the reasons for the problems, and being really honest about that, because a lot of business problems can't really be solved by technology. They have to be solved by culture and strategic shifts.
Absolutely.
But understanding, like, are there specific problems that are real problems that exist because the technology has heretofore not existed, right? So there's that kind of side of the equation to work on. The other side, like I was saying earlier, is just start subscribing to things and building things and exploring things. And I love the example you shared earlier of this bank where, take an hour a week, or, an hour, half hour every day, or whatever you have the capacity for, and just like, how does ChatGPT work? How does build a little something with Lovable, right? You don't have to jump right into like Claude Code, or there's this new one that I've been hearing about, Claude Bot, right? You don't have to jump in that deep yet, but start really understanding the tools, and start also thinking about, look, there's a lot of money sloshing around. Everything seems to have AI attached to it. So start really understanding, like, what is actually AI and what is just a company trying to reskin as AI to raise money, right? And so having that clear understanding is going to be really useful. And I think it's something that everyone in an organization needs to have, like, a fundamental baseline of, right? So when I'm going to date myself here, when I was coming out of college, I was told to put on my resume that I knew Microsoft Word and Excel. Right? And now if you have an office job, that is functionally baked in, right? Everyone understands the basics of those. If you put that on your resume now, people will sort of look sideways at you. And I think it's going to be the same with AI. It's like, of course you have a functional understanding of LLMs, a functional understanding of the coding tools, a functional understanding of, building tools. And so right now it'll set you apart. In a couple of years, it's just going to be table stakes. But getting to that point as an individual where you have that knowledge and then can kind of ideally get others in your organization to collaborate with you.
Yeah, for sure. And if you're a line manager, sometimes it's as simple as your next team meeting, whether that's virtual or in person, just map out the tasks that your team members have that they wish they could automate, or they wish AI could take care of that for you, because they suck and they don't want to do them, and they want to do more exciting, sexy stuff in that job. And that then starts to drive engagement and innovation and job satisfaction, and who knows, even happiness, So I think there's a real connection there.
here's the thing, it does, but you're going to run up against a lot of walls.
Mm-hmm.
So I was on LinkedIn, where I feel like I live at this point, and I saw a job posting for a producer at a media company. And the job posting said, "This is not a creative role." And I thought, why would you say that?
Mm-hmm.
And I think the challenge here is so many organizations are so specific in their job descriptions
Mm-hmm.
and they're so siloed. And when you try to do something that is outside of your job description, people freak out. They get
Mm-hmm.
territorial, they get upset. I mean, I've had this in organizations where I've tried to expand and grow, and this is the reason I'm self-employed, is because every time I'm within a big org, I'm like, I want to do more. I want to help the org. I want to learn. I want to grow. And I run into somebody being like, oh, well, that's Susan's job. You can't touch that.
Mm.
That's Susan's job. And it's like, okay, maybe we should think about growing the org entirely rather than like protecting little fiefdoms. But I think corporate America and corporate world has run on that like little fiefdoms for so long that, well, yes, not having to do like expense reports or meeting summaries or whatever is a net benefit. I think we also need to talk about like corporate culture and roles and responsibilities in a much bigger way.
Yeah.
And the idea of hiring people who are like domain experts who want to grow versus people who just want to do these little tiny siloed pieces. And that's, I think, that's gonna be the biggest shift for me. It's not gonna be about like the technology so much. It's gonna be about the cultural shift from little micro niches
Yeah.
to bigger picture things.
100%. I'm seeing that already in HR, L&D, talent, kind of the area that I focus in, particularly around, classic one is learning designers creating content, for example. We can no longer sit there and create slides and decks and
Mhm.
e-learning modules and more and more and more and more and more content, even though that's what we're seeing right now, because that's where people are in their comfort zone. And obviously this term work slop that we're starting to hear about, that came out of the Harvard Business Review at the end of last year, that rubbish that we just produce out of AI because we're producing more and more and more content. We're having to lift ourselves up and become guardians of quality and
Yeah.
work in that more collaborative way where actually, HR might not be HR in the near future. It might combine with occupational health and marketing and like all more people focused functions because of this technology requirement of collaboration to stop exactly what you're talking about. And we're starting to hear more about these kind of wraparound human distinctive skills, such as critical thinking,
Yeah.
creativity, empathy, direct communication. We need to be able to communicate with technology in the right way that perhaps we've not always been able to do with people. We're not always the clearest in our own communication with junior team members, let alone a technology that's new to us. So those kind of development of those skills and that culture that you're talking about, it's not just we've got to teach people to prompt. We have to make sure we have AI literacy. It's actually that real core future skills, future work piece, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. And I think that, people, the critical skills are going to be independent thinking, being self-motivated is a really big one.
Yeah.
And I write for Forbes, and I wrote something a couple months ago about kind of this emerging hierarchy that we're seeing, which is the question to ask yourself, and this is going to sound pretty direct and blunt, but it is, are you better than an AI? And
Hmm.
how are you better than an AI? And I have like a customer service example that I use, which is, really good customer service cannot be replaced by AI.
Hmm.
So I was checking in for a flight recently, and the woman at the check-in counter said, "Oh, I noticed you booked seat 20A. It's not actually a window seat. It looks like it is, but there's no actual window. So I'm assuming you wanted a window seat. Why don't I bump you up one row because the flight's not full and you get a window?" She didn't have to do that, right? I had
Hmm.
booked that seat. She could have just been like, "You're in seat 20A, go check in there,"
Yeah,
right?
bad luck. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, or maybe, yeah, she could have just checked me in and it wouldn't have been an issue, but she went out of
Hmm.
her way. That's not really something an AI could do,
Hmm.
right? So an AI would have just been like, here's your ticket, goodbye.
Hmm.
And then like a bad customer service person would have just been like disinterested or slow or kind of surly or whatever. And
Hmm.
so when I'm out in the world, right, people who go above and beyond, people who, when I ask them a question and they say, "I don't know, but I will find out," or
Yeah.
"I don't know, talk to this person," or if they don't know the answer, but they caveat it with, let me look or
Hmm.
something, then great.
Hmm.
But if I run into this all the time, I don't know, and they just walk away, I'm like, that's not helpful, right? Like, why do you need to exist when I could just ask ChatGPT?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And so I think that's going to be a really, really big market shift, is getting people to understand that you cannot just do that baseline anymore. And that's going to be really a big, I think, shift for a lot of people to have to really rethink their mindset.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is why I say to HR folk all the time, like, you really have a clear agenda on this now, and in partnership with innovation, IT, you know, info security, you know, you name it, you're all connected in some way now, and with a slightly different focus. But it's so important to be part of that conversation, not just as an order taker, but actually, and I'm not saying you need to be an expert, like you said, in regards to tech or coding or AI or whatever it might be, machine learning, but at least understanding the art of the possible here. I was speaking to some HR consultants recently, and we're very much still in the space of, you know, creating grievance documents and operational manuals, and very excited around, you know, meeting note transcription, etc.
Yeah.
And I went quite hard on the challenge around, you know, we if you've seen reports last year, 2025, one of the biggest use cases, the volume use case for Copilot last year, was people trauma dumping and using it for, you know, mental health support and well-being support, rightly or wrongly, whatever your view is. We need to understand that and put some guardrails and some safeguards around it. The BBC
Absolutely.
News saying a 75% increase in people trauma dumping into AI. Is it set up for that? Can it help us? Yes, it could probably help us for some in the moment support if you're feeling anxious because of that next big meeting, or you need some box breathing exercises, or you need a bit of support to feel okay, because it feels familiar, right? AI. It doesn't
Yeah.
feel like any other technology. It feels like you're talking to somebody sometimes. But HR need to be on top of that to understand what the risks are, what the
Oh, yeah.
safeguarding issues are, etc. as well.
Yeah, and it's fascinating because, like, you know, I've never used ChatGPT or anything for that. I mean, I use it for a lot of things. I haven't used it for that, but I do think that's illustrative of a much bigger problem in access to mental health care and people's stress levels and people's general sort of unhappiness, right? And so that's a symptom, right, that we need to address on a much larger scale. But I do think for HR, and I'm really curious to hear your take on this, um, you know, one thing I've noticed with HR and with hiring in particular is no one is happy with the current state of AI for hiring, right? So every job post so there's, you know, AI apply and all these platforms that are functionally like, we'll send your resume everywhere, and we'll use AI to customize your cover letter, and we'll do this, we'll do that. And so the end result of that is every job is getting thousands of applicants.
Yeah.
99% of whom are not qualified, but they're just running AI apply and they don't care, right? It's a monthly fee. It costs them virtually nothing. And on the other side, you have these screening tools, and there's lawsuits right now to challenge the black box nature of these screening tools, where, you know, applicants who are perfectly qualified, who meet every single qualification, are getting not even rejected because they have an interview and it doesn't go well, but rejected within 5 seconds, right? Flat out, because they don't have like certain keywords.
Yep.
And it's created this arms race of like, well, here's this thing that does all the keywords for you. And then, you know, AI, the HR department that's trying to hire is just so overwhelmed, and they wind up just throwing up their hands and just being like, we'll just hire the boss's cousin. He seems good, right?
Yeah.
So how are you sort of talking to HR folks, or what are you hearing from HR folks about this specific use case? Because I think this is really illustrative of a promise to make things better where actually things got a million times worse.
Yeah, it's a really good one, and I've got a couple of views on it. So thanks for raising it. And part of me kind of thinks, is this, Courtney, if I had a penny for every time I said AI hasn't caused the problem, it's just shining a light on it, right? Which I think is what you're kind of talking about. And I write about this, shameless plug, in my new book that's out in May, AI for People Professionals. I talk about the AI, the hair model, right? AI being inside of the H and the R, between the human and the relations, not reliant on it. And I guess this is where we need to understand what the problem is that we're looking to solve. And sometimes, particularly around the recruitment and talent acquisition piece that you're talking about, sometimes just being having something simple like an AI transparency statement. Okay, so on every job that goes up, of course, you're looking at your HRIS systems, your applicant tracking systems, you're looking at any biased language that's in job applications and adverts, etc. But you're right, there will always be people that just ping in applications, and there'll always be people that probably would be great for the role that fall between the cracks. And that's where we need to become those guardians of output, not stuck in the detail and the grassroots of it. And sometimes an AI transparency statement will say something like, you are very welcome to use artificial intelligence in your application. In fact, we encourage it because we're looking for those kind of skills. But just be warned, your assessment activities will be carried out by a human. And we
Sure.
want you to talk about all of the wonderful things that you've told us in your AI generated CV or application or interview letter. And even something like that basically draws the line to say, we know what's going on, we're ahead of the curve, we understand how things work, we appreciate your entrepreneurialism and your attitude to get ahead and your ambition, but we expect the work to be done to sit underneath that and not just submit AI slop, for example, this work slop that we've talked about. I'm not saying that that's going to solve the problem of the bots kind of scoring people in, scoring people out, etc. But this is where we need to have that architect guardian type approach to anything that AI is part of. That the term, I guess, is human in the loop, right, in regards to this stuff. That person who's sampling, quality checking, can be comfortable that if they went in and sample checked anybody at any time, they knew they were getting the right quality of applicant or the right fit in regards to that. But also having that experimental mindset, that test and learn, that actually you might not get it right in all role applications all the time. Or there might be a problem that's happening where good people are unfortunately being sifted out because of the technology, or you're just not using the right technology. But we can't hold on to this sunk cost fallacy that we've already put so much money in that we just need to keep going, and we lose even more money because we don't want egg on our face. So there's a couple of things there that HR have to strategically consider, not just from an operating model and tech model, but a culture model and a mindset model that brings all that stuff together. And how are the people who are doing it great? How are they doing it? Who are you out there talking to? What conferences are you going to
Yeah.
where you're hearing small organizations, large organizations, and everybody in between doing it, and it's working really, really well? Because no one's got it perfect, and we've really got to learn to listen to each other and share and test and learn and do all that great stuff that we've talked about.
This is a provocative question, but your last comments kind of got me thinking about this. So, do you think we are entering the end phase of the job application process? And what I mean by that is, it is an expectation that people will, at minimum, have LinkedIn profiles, right?
Mm-hmm.
That detail their credentials, that detail their experience. If I was hiring, why couldn't I just go on LinkedIn and find the person I needed, right? And just pattern match it. And again, not everyone's going to be a culture fit or a personality fit, or maybe they overstate their experience or whatever. But the idea of like putting up public job applications, to me seems really kind of outdated and weird when we have all this information and we could be deploying AI slightly differently. Now, there are obviously downsides to that, especially for entry-level roles. But I still think like the idea of like post a job, post a laundry list of things this person has to do, right?
Yeah.
Many of them actually are like wish list things. And, I was interviewing for a role a while ago, back when I was still interested in that kind of thing. And I had all of the experience. I had done, great projects and all this. And they said, well, but you don't have a computer science degree. And I said, no, I got my degree 20 years ago and I have actually built this stuff, right? And they just couldn't get around. They were like, well, we really need somebody with this, that, or the other degree. And I was just like, why? Right. And so I think I mean, I'd love to hear your thoughts on this, but the idea that, can we break out of this outdated mindset? Like, just because we've had open job applications in the newspaper or whatever for X number of years, why do we need to keep doing that in the future?
Yeah, absolutely. And, you're talking more about a headhunting model, right? Which exists.
Right.
But I guess we're also assuming that everybody in the job market, in the talent pool, is on LinkedIn, and they're not, So
Sure.
there still has to be that diversity of, how we reach people in different talent pools. But I think you're absolutely right. And again, that shines the light on culture and people and the way we think about stuff, doesn't it? As opposed to the process. I know LinkedIn are doing a lot around matching skills and doing a skills first organizational approach around that. And I definitely see more people being hired through direct approach now through LinkedIn and things like that, whether AI is involved or that or not. But a lot of this, I think, as we start to think about what does AI mean on our maturity curve or our maturity model. So many people here on today's call, for example, are probably in that kind of first level discovery, building towards the second level of AI literacy. We're certainly not in that third or fourth level in regards to organizational maturity and adoption,
Oh, for
that
sure.
change architect type piece. I think we'll just keep going round the circle and going round, basically going back to what's the problem that we're trying to solve, right? Is it talent pool? Is it requirements? Is it future need? Is it, the automation around entry level jobs? And to your point, I get asked quite frequently, well, what does that mean for apprentices and graduates and
Yeah.
interns? Because typically their first jobs are those junior level, kind of next level up type roles. But now we're going to have to train them to be managers when they've got no management experience because AI is going to automate a lot of that initial type role. So again, if I was on this call, I'd be thinking around what does this mean from an organizational development perspective? But actually, how do we look at the workflows that are happening within our organization and the types of people that are coming into our organization? What does that mean in terms of not the skills that they need now, but the skills they need in 2 to 3 years' time? Because AI will automate quite a lot of those jobs required right now. And how are we going to be okay about that rather than, to your point, the tension of AI is going to take my job? So it's a culture conversation. All of this is a creative culture conversation. And as HR people, as leaders, as operational managers, whoever is on this webinar listening to this call, we need to be thinking about how can I play my part in that, and how can I challenge my own mindset? How AI and future ready am I? Can I do a self-assessment to really score my own readiness and my team's readiness from a 1 to 5, and really start to be quite self-aware and challenge myself and what's my initial change reaction? And are you going to be done too? Are you going to be part of what you do to the organization? I think that's where we need to grapple with some of this stuff, because we're not going to have the answers to all of it. But, we got to be part of what that means, or you're just going to kind of get left behind, unfortunately.
Yeah, and I think one thing that might shift, especially for maybe younger workers, and I'd love to hear your take on this, is hiring a little bit more for adaptability
Yeah,
and growth potential. So,
absolutely.
finding young people coming out of university or coming out of high school or job training programs or wherever they're coming from, and really understanding like this is somebody who can take initiative, take responsibility, learn and grow. Now, obviously, you still need certain people with certain skill sets to do certain things. So, like, I'm not a technical person. I know a little bit of some things, but I'm certain, like, I'm not a Unity developer, right? So, if they're hiring for that, that's not me. But the idea that, and I think this is really this entrepreneurial startup mindset is I can do a lot of things and I can like
Yeah.
learn and shapeshift. And I think, encouraging younger people more than anything to come out with this entrepreneurial mindset of like, here's a bunch of stuff I can do, right? And here's showing that you can learn and showing that you can develop things and showing that you can kind of see things through end to end and have different roles and responsibilities. I think that's going to be, organizations are going to start hiring people who demonstrate that, not necessarily like, I have a marketing degree.
Hmm.
Because at the end of the day, like, that's fine, but everything is going to shift so quickly that you almost want to hire for personality more than hard skills on some level.
Yeah. And you're right. Take a marketing degree or a HR degree or whatever. It's going to be pretty much out of date, right? As soon as people
Yeah.
get into the workplace, considering how quickly things are moving. And also, we're moving from a knowledge heavy culture to a skills first culture.
Mhm.
Yeah, large language models have democratized knowledge, right? Most of us can now go and self-learn, subject to kind of testing out and checking hallucinations and checking our knowledge, etc. We can go and learn anything now, but that we really want to, as long as we've got that want and that will, to your point around personality and drive and that learning agility as well. You know, what have I always relied on, or what did I think was right that I now know isn't right, that I need to put down, and I need to learn the new thing and apply that in record time. And having that entrepreneurial mindset to do that is fundamental and key. It's absolutely that space of also what you're talking about, resilience and mental toughness. And I don't just mean how do I get back up when things are hard, or I get knocked off my feet metaphorically, you know, or I get some feedback or criticized, or I don't get things right. It's about how do I set myself up then, rather than waiting for the train to hit me, being stood on the train tracks, I can actually see the train coming down the train tracks. And how do I circumnavigate that in terms of my mindset that I'm ready for when the train passes? I think that mental toughness, that resilience, that learning agility, that ability to question why. Why are we doing it this way? Not just let's get on the automation train because that's what everyone else is doing. Is this the right thing? You know, what does it actually mean to do this? What question are we trying to answer? What are we going after? That kind of, you know, questioning why we should be doing what we're doing is, and being okay about that, feeling psychologically safe. And if you're a manager and a leader, appreciating your teams asking the why, you know, that whole thing that Branson talks about, kind of hire great people and get out the way, you
Yes.
know.
But so many organizations are so unable to do that. And it is a constant frustration, right? I have so many friends that work at big companies and they want to grow and succeed and change and adopt new technologies and do interesting things. And they're constantly running into this layer of middle management where I think, particularly in big tech companies, you have a layer of people that are incumbents who have gotten pretty wealthy because they've been there a long time. They're pretty senior. They have these pretty chill jobs where they, you know, do a couple phone calls a week and then they just hang out. But, you know, there's prestige associated with their job. They don't want to be retired at, you know, 45 or 50. And so you have this organizational pressure of people who are like, why would I innovate? Why would I change? Why would I help people grow? Right. And so how do we now, and this is a little beyond the scope of AI, but I do think AI is going to, you know, be a big part of this. Like, how do we sort of change that culture around, you know, just sort of sitting like, well, everything's fine so far, right? Like that's the innovator's dilemma, right? That's the classic business school book that everyone reads, but nobody actually absorbs, because it's like everything's fine until it's not. So how do we start disrupting these incumbency models like early, I guess?
Yeah. And I think that will happen generationally with our digital natives. We find in the workshops that we run very practical hands-on workshops, which kind of will give a framework to anybody who's there, but we won't tell people how to do their jobs in those workshops. We won't tell them the workflows that they have to innovate or put into AI. We facilitate them coming up with those decisions. And that's where those digital natives are testing and learning already and trialing, and that experimental mindset that will grow from the grassroots up. And it will start to become very uncomfortable for those people that are on the golf course for so many days a week or whatever it might be, because suddenly, metaphorically speaking, they'll start to feel some heat under their feet and some pressure. And, you know, what does that mean to them as a leader or middle management or whatever that might be? And that might start to displace certain people from the workforce, that it is just too much for some people to handle. I always talk about on webinars, bless her, my mum retired between Windows 8 and Windows 9 because the change was just too much, you know. So for some people in the workforce, it will just become too much. And you know what? That's okay. As long as we can enable people to feel that they've made that decision, right? That it's right for them. It's the right time to have that early retirement, to step out of role, to step sideways, to maybe study something new, whatever it might be. Culturally, AI is going to enable people to make their own decisions, or the people that want to make their own decisions will be enabled to in lots of different ways. And I talk about this. Sorry, go ahead.
No, it's a great. So, you know, I think we're sort of talking about people that are white collar workers broadly in this conversation. But as we talk about learning and learning AI skills, I'm curious if you have thoughts on folks that are like frontline blue collar workers. And I don't mean frontline blue collar workers as in like machinists or welders or plumbers, because those people's jobs, I think, are probably the most secure of anyone in this brave new world. I'm talking about people working behind the counter at a fast food restaurant, people working behind the counter at a Starbucks, Luckin Coffee, the big Chinese chain, has just come to New York, and people are fascinated by it because there's really no humans, right? You order through the app or you order on a machine. And I see that directionally moving forward. And I think a lot of companies are thinking, well, we can save a lot of money doing this. But I wonder, how do we get AI learning to folks who don't have degrees, who might not have even finished high school, who have language barriers, who, how do we make sure they are set up for success in this new world of work, not just, people who work in offices?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. And this is what I call, and I want companies to understand, when I say AI dividend, we all have our own AI dividend, right?
Yeah.
And whether you're in the workplace or not in the workplace, most people who are using a PC, a laptop, a phone, a tablet, a smartwatch, whatever it might be, will be using AI in some kind of way. Now, I appreciate there's still a digital poverty gap, and there's still people that will not have those devices and access to that technology, or even access to the internet, Wi-Fi, 3G, 4G, 5G, coming to 6G, etc. And we need to do more for those people. We need to do a lot more for those people. For people who don't connect in the workplace naturally with AI because they are perhaps more manual workers, service workers, hospitality, whatever it might be, some of the most important people you can actually recognize in the workplace right now, they will be using AI for their personal lives potentially. Most people will be using ChatGPT on their mobile phone or speaking to it. And this is where I think it's important, and for all of us to recognize that we have to support people to find their own AI dividend, that incremental benefit where we connect to that technology in one way or another, and we feel like we're engaged in a healthy way. And I'm not talking about, how we walked into the internet, for example. We're seeing already, Australia did it a couple of weeks ago. The UK is talking about banning social media for people under the age of 16, for example, because the right safeguards were not put in place. This is one thing we need to make sure with AI, that the safeguards are put in place, but that people need to know how to use it in a healthy way. So, for example, my IA dividend, I have fibromyalgia as a health condition. I run a very small business. I travel quite a lot. I use AI to help me manage my health. I use it to help me manage my business. I use it for well-being requirements. I use it for everything, to be honest.
Yeah.
So my AI dividend is quite expansive because of, as you said earlier, we're in it. We're in the technology. We get it. We understand it. For some people, it will be understanding how that technology can help them meal plan, vacation plan, keep the kids busy for, an hour on a Sunday afternoon when it's tipping it down and they just need some headspace. And I'm not talking about just putting kids in front of screens. I'm talking about my business partner, Hayley Bird, talks about our AI for the Average Joe podcast show, where she asked ChatGPT just to create 10 treasure hunt clues for her 6-year-old and the same for her 8-year-old. She printed them out, put them around the house, and the kids were busy for an hour. So just a bit of a thinking partner sometimes as well, that kind of collaborator, helping you make decisions, devil's advocate, whatever it might be. So this is why we need to think broader. It's not just about productivity and efficiency in organizations.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot of creativity with AI as well. And one thing that's fascinating to me is a lot of more traditional creatives have gotten very angry about AI. And I do understand from like a copyright and data training perspective why that would be the case. But I don't think AI is displacing creatives at all. I think creatives are using it to do interesting things they couldn't have otherwise done. And I think also there are going to be new genres of AI created art. Now, a lot of it right now looks pretty bad. It does look like slop. You can tell when it's an AI generated image for the most part. These, nano banana videos or Sora. I mean, everyone kind of played with Sora for a week and then forgot about it, I think, because it was like, oh, look, here's another dude taking a selfie with Elon Musk. Yay.
Yes.
Right. But I think there are a handful of artists who are now starting to do really creative stuff. And I do think like Sora, if you're just scrolling brain rot, like Sora is not going to replace TikTok, right? And I think we have this weird mentality around like human created slop, which is a lot of what I see on TikTok, versus like machine created slop, but it's all kind of slop. And so I'm curious to sort of bigger picture think how you're thinking about this, how you're addressing this idea of like AI creating entirely new things.
Yeah.
And what that's going to do to traditional forms of communication or forms of creativity.
Yeah. And it goes back for me around what's your own mindset on an individual basis. How do you feel about that and why? If you're feeling defensive about that because perhaps that's your passion, your industry, your how you make your money, for example, there needs to be a bit of a reality check there because the horse is bolted to a degree with some of this. And it's whether you're on the bus or off the bus. I know I'm using lots of cliches and metaphors right now, but it's how do we feel about that? How can you shape the culture, the conversation? How do you feel about that? Why? If you're actively standing against that, that's great. What's your opinion on that? Be really clear about that. Go to market on your opinion on that as well. That's okay. We're not saying everybody has to be on the AI train,
Right.
but you've got to be educated and opinionated and be clear on why you feel the way you do about that. And that could be someone who's frontline in an organization, that could be a creative, an artist. We hear a lot of actors talk about that, for example, in regards to image rights, etc.
Yeah.
Just make sure you have a clear definition of why you feel the way you do and get some data to back that up rather than just having a bit of a hissy fit because it doesn't fit what you're doing. So
I
I
know
guess
it's
that's kind of
so
my take on it.
it's so, and I know we're coming up to time, and if there's questions, I guess people can drop them in the chat for the last couple of minutes, but it is so frustrating to me when I hear people just blanket say, I don't like AI. And it's like, fine, Sora's not for you. I get it. Or, ChatGPT has hallucinated. I get it. But the New York Times wrote a really interesting article a couple months ago that I'd encourage people to find and check out, where somebody tried to live without AI for a weekend and they could not do it. They had to basically go sit in a cave in the dark
Wow.
and not talk to anyone because AI is baked into everything. It's
Yes.
snowed a lot in New York City yesterday where I'm at, and AI is baked into all the models around weather planning, around transit planning, around snow plows and where they go, right? Those models are all powered by AI and they're all seemingly working, which is great. But the idea that people are just like anti-AI, it's like, look, some tools might not be for you, and that's fine. But I think breaking through that is one of the biggest barriers that people like you and I are going to have.
Yeah. 100%. And before we hand back to Bob to kind of wrap up and talk about next steps, I think, if I was to give people on this webinar, people listening today, kind of three kind of core practical tips when it comes to AI. The first one is just, like you said, recognize it's happening. It's not a future technology. It's here. It's already here, whether it's your kids using it on the phones, whether it's, your use at work, whether that's you going to the hospital and having scans, some of this technology we're seeing in healthcare now around identification of illnesses and cancers and stuff is just phenomenal, so there's so many positive things. So, accept it is being here would be number one. Number two, be self-aware, reflect. How do you feel about that and why? What kind of stories are you telling other people around AI, and what are you showing about yourself, particularly if you're in a leadership role or a parent role or whatever that might be? Just be clear what that means and what that stands for. And number three, if you are a people leader or you're in an influencing role whatsoever, recognize that people will be in different places at different times, and that's okay. We all have a different response to change, but ultimately, this is only going one way, and we need to be really, really clear about that too. So, yeah, I think that sometimes it's a bit of a reality check for people. We don't have the answers to everything, particularly when it comes to sustainability. We know data centers are using huge amounts of electricity and water, and I get the sustainability question on every talk and every webinar, and I don't have the answer to it, but we know that quantum computing, as you talked about earlier, is going to help us with some of that. And we also know that, we're talking about climate change here. We've not been able to solve that problem as a human race.
No.
So we're going to need a little bit of help from somewhere, right? Okay, so we're coming to the end. We've got 4 minutes left. Bob, we're going to kind of hand over to you for next steps, just to wrap us up on today's webinar, if that's okay.
Erica, thank you very much. Thank you, Courtney. I hope you all found that as fascinating as I did. I will be speaking to ChatGPT shortly to get my post ready, post-event LinkedIn post sorted. Thank you very much, ladies. It was absolutely fascinating. If you are in the need to book speakers, if you're in the industry, I'm your man. come and speak to me, and I will give you these wonderful ladies. Come and speak to the Closer Speakers Consultancy, which you can find quite simply online, the Closer Speakers. I forgot my own website address, would you believe it? thecloser.consulting. And you can reach out to me, bob@thecloser.consulting. I hope you all enjoyed that last hour and found that useful. Ladies, thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Bob. And
Thank you,
Erica,
Bob.
great chatting with you. This was a lot of fun.
And you, thank you so much, Courtney. And thanks everybody for joining. Appreciate it. Have a good rest of the day.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.